How about I just do the opposite now? So the last 6 weeks, I've done a whole bunch of posterior chain stuff. You know, I've done deficit deadlifts. I've done lots of hypers and back raises, like many sets, basically almost every single day. With the hope that was going to translate to the barbell lifts, you know, squats and deadlifts. A week off the floor. All right, let's see if this works. Started with deficits. Then I kind of transitioned to more volume when I discovered that the volume, you know, the hypers, the back raises were being so restorative to my spine and how I felt, and it was fantastic. So I started smashing the living hell out of them, and I started feeling really good. Well, but what I've noticed as the days went on, as the weeks went on, is that I started feeling more and more unbalanced. My guts kept spilling forward. I started getting more and more an anterior pelvic tilt. Which is funny because the main muscles involved in back raises or 45 hypers is the hamstrings. And you could also say the glutes. You know, the lower back cannot and does not impact hip extension. Your lower back doesn't do hip extension. It does lower back extension, but it doesn't cause you to go from a 45-degree hip flexion to standing up. So it doesn't do that. So the majority of the work done for that is the glutes and hamstrings. They are the main hip extensors. So I initially thought, okay, if you do a lot of 45 hypers and back raises, you will combat anterior pelvic tilt. However, those exercises, those muscles get outworked by the lower back, because the lower back, depends how you do it, especially the way I was doing it, like Klokov does it, you know, you go to a hip extension and then you add some lower back extension as well. So in all of those days that I did the 45 hyper and back raises, I was just feeling the lower back more than anything. And so if you fast forward 3 weeks of that, you will see that the lower back gets tighter and tighter and stronger. And it starts to overpower the effects that I was hoping for, which was this restorative nature to the pelvic balance, right? But in fact, it wasn't. And so it got to a point where I started doing bench squats and I started feeling like I was going to freaking blow a hernia. Now, I've never had a hernia injury before. I've kind of always been in tune with my body. So when I feel something going on in the groin, in that abdominal region, I feel like I'm not bracing. I'm feeling I'm just hanging onto my... I'm just kind of like not controlling it. I would just basically stop the exercise altogether. I've always had that kind of intuition about, okay, this doesn't feel like it should. Something is going wrong. And so ever since I felt that, I've started thinking about the opposite side of my body, the anterior side. So the abs, the hip flexors. So I'm thinking now to myself, I need to address the whole hernia thing, the whole prevention of the hernia. I have not done my body justice. I thought the 45 hypers were going to address everything, that were going to strengthen my lower back and maintain good position of the pelvis. But in fact, that hasn't been the case. My lower back has gone stronger disproportionately to the other parts of the body, which were going to be involved in that hip balance. So now I've got this anterior pelvic tilt and I'm not feeling good. And I can't feel good when you can't brace good. So now I'm thinking to myself, all right, let's go to the other side. And I know it's not good to kind of oscillate between two extremes. Let's go to the other side. So now I know that if you spend too much time strengthening this side, you're going to end up with a freaking hernia, man. Basically, it's like that. It's basically like that. What happens if you spend 6 weeks going freaking crazy, on the anterior part of your body? So core, hip flexion, and just abs. Okay, let's train hip flexion. Let's not worry about hip extension anymore. Hip flexion. What are the results going to be? I'm sitting here and I'm wondering. I've kind of been forced to think about this. I've been forced to kind of deal with this because it's not even a matter of getting stronger. It's just about feeling healthy and feeling good with myself and preventing a freaking hernia. So I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, let's do the exact opposite. Like somewhere in the opposite realm lies, the cure for the weak anterior core and prevention of the hernia. Now, if you think to yourself, let's just think about this. If you do the exact same stuff that I did for the posterior chain, same type of volume for the anterior chain, maybe at 6 weeks from now, I'm going to be complaining about lower back pain because now I'm herniating the other way. So if you spend too much time smashing the posterior chain, you're going to be herniating your freaking anterior. If you spend too much, like 6 weeks, and a lot of volume on your anterior chain, you're going to be herniating the back end, which is the discs. So see how there's like two extremes here? Some people blow backs, some people blow hernias. Some people don't blow anything. So the people that are not blowing anything anywhere are the people that are just balanced. How cool is that word? Balance. So it's funny, right? Because people that spend too much time in hip or let's just say lumbar flexion, they're blowing their discs. And people like me who are spending their freaking life in lumbar extension or anterior pelvic tilt, we're running the risk of getting hernias. Somewhere in the middle is harmony. Somewhere in the middle is where we want to be. Now, we all have, tendencies to go one way or the other because of our structure, how we walk, our previous athletic history. I always said to you guys, always said that I am freaking an anterior pelvic human, anterior pelvically tilted human. That's how I walk. And when I see people all around me, the way I kind of watch people, how they move and how they run, jump, squat, all that stuff, I always kind of, keep a keen eye on how they move. I remember seeing LeBron James, he's in a massive anterior pelvic tilt. And then I've learned that a lot of people, a lot of explosive athletes, powerful athletes are leaning towards anterior pelvic tilt, which is interesting. But anyway, we all need to strive to strengthen the weakness. Yesterday I spoke about how the wide stance squats absolutely embarrassed me. My hip flexors are so weak. And this is where we get into what's weak, what needs stretching, what needs strengthening. So, I have some beliefs on this. A lot of you guys have heard this. I believe, for the most part, it's not 100%, foolproof. A strong muscle is a long muscle. That's how I think about it. A short muscle is a weak muscle. And I've experienced this many, many, many times. Now, you have anterior pelvic tilt. What does that mean? Well, we know, because where the pelvis is stuck, hip flexors are short, lower back is short. Hamstrings are long, the belly is long. So, it would make sense to stretch the short stuff, strengthen the long stuff, right? But how does it make sense for the body to be in a long state with something that is really weak? That is literally like taking the weakest structure and the weakest bridge, right? And stretching it even longer. Makes no sense. The body likes to tighten and protect and guard what's weak and what's ill. So we have a thing where we're examining people. If somebody comes in with bellyache and we, as we say, they are guarding their belly, that is an indicative sign that the belly is really bad. If somebody doesn't even let you touch their belly, something is really happening. Do they have peritonitis? Do they have a surgical belly? Meaning, is this belly going to be for surgery? Are we going to have to take them to the theater and work out what's going on? Something is happening in their belly when the person doesn't even let you touch them. Okay, that's guarding. And this is where I feel like that type of thing can apply to muscles as well. The body, the hip flexor is so weak, so under stressed, that it's protecting itself by keeping it short. It doesn't go, oh, I'm so weak and I'm so frightened of everything. Let me expose myself completely to injury. That makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me. Now I will tell you my case. My hip flexors are short, my lower back is short. My deadlift is by far my best lift. I feel like my hamstrings are really, really strong. Really strong. How could I be deadlifting 265 if I have really long and weak hamstrings? Makes no sense. Makes no sense. So I feel my hamstrings are strong because I can deadlift. I'm better in the lean over position. That's where my strength is. So those long guys are strong. Okay? My belly. What are we going to say about our belly? My belly. So my belly is really extended, really long. Is it weak or strong? I feel my belly is weak. That's what I feel. But then, how haven't I, had hernias by now? How haven't I had hernias by now? This is where we get into trouble because some of these things start to conflict each other. What I feel right now is I need to strengthen my hip flexors, right? The hip flexors are the stuff that's making me go into anterior pelvic tilt. So out of these 4 sides, lower back, abs, hamstrings, hip flexors, out of these 4 things, it's not an equal weighing in my mind. I feel like the most important aspect of anterior pelvic tilt is the hip flexors. That's where I think the key is. All of the other guys follow the lead of the hip flexors. That's what I feel like. That's what I really, really feel like. Those guys are so freaking strong. So strong. And the way they are positioned in your body, I feel like their physical impact on the body is bigger than any other. If your hip flexors are so locked up, your glutes can't overpower it. And look how big the glutes are. How big are the glutes? And they can't overpower these Wesley hip flexors. Nothing can overpower them. So the hip flexors are like this huge component in your structure. So I feel, when I think about the psoas, a lot of people are like, you can stretch all night. I remember one of you guys said to me, David Goggins stretches like a few hours a night. And he's been doing that for years. And I like the first thought, I remember hearing that at the time. And when I first heard David say this, I used to think to myself, man, if you're stretching 3 hours every night for like millions of years, stretching ain't doing it, man. You can't stretch something that is frightened. You can't stretch something that wants to curl up in a corner. You can't pull them apart and have a happy tissue. You can't do that. You need to strengthen it. So how do you strengthen the psoas? That's my question. Because I reckon if I strengthen the psoas, iliacus and the psoas predominantly, they release, right? Because now they're getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And as they get stronger and stronger, they're getting longer and longer. What do we have now? All of a sudden, the belly starts to pull in as well. Because the belly doesn't need to fight the psoas anymore. The pull of the psoas. The belly starts to come back in. Lower back starts to also flatten out, and the hamstrings go back to the normal kind of resting rate state. Now, you can say that about any of the 4 players in that lower cross syndrome. You could say the same thing about hamstrings. I feel like the psoas and the iliacus are the biggest pullers. This is why I'm approaching this like this. Because yesterday, I did wide stance squats, and I felt my hip flexors like crazy, man. They were like dying. That is not a sign of a strong tissue. When I do deadlifts, I don't feel my hamstrings like that. When I do my squats, I don't feel my hamstrings like that. When I do any other exercise, I don't feel anything else cause so much trouble as the hip flexors. That's how I think about it. Obviously, that whole long muscle is a strong muscle. A weak muscle is a short muscle. It doesn't go for every single case. But that's how I think about it when I isolate the hip flexors. I think I need to work on my hip flexors. I'm going to really emphasize the hell out of that in the next few days, weeks, and see what I can do. Maybe I was doing, the hypers felt good. Trust me, they felt good. I love them. I recommend it to everyone on the freaking planet. But they didn't address my weakness. My weakness lies at the front. Let's run with that idea now. And let's see where I end up. Hopefully away from the hernia realm. And just back to normal health. And hopefully I get some benefits on the strength part as well. Anyway, guys, long ass freaking rant. Hopefully you got something out of that. Maybe I'm wrong with some of my thoughts here. Maybe I'm misinterpreting some ideas. As always, I just share my ideas, my thoughts as they kind of flow through me. Throw them out and wait for the feedback and see what you guys have to say. None of this is obviously scripted. I haven't read anything before I went on here. I just let it go. Anyway, guys, special thanks to the fellas on the screen, like always. Thank you, everyone on the Patreon, on the comments, Instagram, Discord. For the fellas on Discord, I am releasing another Q&A, hopefully tonight, if my internet allows it. Sometimes it just doesn't like to upload a certain amount of data for whatever reason. But I'm going to try and get that out to you, if not tonight, then tomorrow. And yeah, hopefully you guys like that as well. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.